For 5 years, my marriage to Thomas was the picture of suburban success in Washington, D.C. When I finally secured a massive promotion, the future was supposed to be golden. Instead, Thomas suddenly insisting on separate finances for equality unleashed a calculated strategy of betrayal. Chapter by chapter, I unravel a complex web of financial deceit and emotional infidelity that went far deeper than a simple affair. My rising rage fueled a secret counterplan, culminating in a devastating Sunday morning confrontation where I didn't just expose him. I leveraged his own greed and manipulation to execute a cold, precise justice that left him with nothing but the truth and me with a hard-won peace. The promotion wasn't just a paycheck, it was the key to the life I'd always mapped out. For 5 years in Washington, I had poured every late night, every forgotten weekend, into that glass tower. Thomas, my husband, was supposed to be the anchor, the safe harbor in the storm of corporate ambition. We had a beautiful townhouse in Georgetown, a future sketched out in matching 401 ks, and a love I believed was bedrock. It was a Tuesday. I remember the scent of expensive bourbon and triumph in the air of the corner office. My boss, a man whose approval I'd chased for half a decade, shook my hand. Chief Operating Officer. The title felt like heavy gold on my tongue. My salary had nearly doubled. I called Thomas immediately, the words tumbling out in a rush of pure, unadulterated joy. "Baby, I did it. I'm the COO. His response was less than the confetti shower I'd imagined. "That's incredible, honey. I knew you would. But look, we need to talk about the accounts." The accounts. Just like that, the golden moment tarnished. When I walked through the front door that night, expecting champagne and celebration, I got a man pacing our living room, a man who looked less like a proud partner and more like an accountant drawing up a prenup. "With your new income," he started, running a hand through his hair, a habit he only had when he was rehearsing a difficult conversation, "it's only fair that we move to separate checking. Just for ease. To keep things equal. Separate accounts." After 5 years of combined finances, a single, shared pot, he was talking about drawing a line. A financial wall. It sounded reasonable on the surface. Equality. But the way his eyes avoided mine, the subtle tension in his jaw, it felt like the first hairline fracture in our bedrock. "Thomas, what are you talking about? We're married. We've always been a team. What's equal about dividing what we earn together?" "It's about protecting you, babe," he insisted, his voice smooth, too smooth. "If anything ever happened to my business, you wouldn't be exposed. It's smart, financial planning." I looked at him, my husband, my best friend, and I saw a stranger presenting me with a contract. I loved him, yes, but for the first time, a cold, metallic taste of fear washed over me. Not fear of financial loss, but fear of what this meant. He saw the hesitation, the question in my eyes, and that's when he played the first of his cruel cards. He kissed me, a soft, deliberate pressure on my lips that felt like a seal on a deal I hadn't agreed to. He pulled back just enough to look deep into my soul and said, "You trust me, don't you?" If you have ever felt that sickening, stomach-dropping moment where the person you trust most asks for a blind leap of faith that goes against every fiber of your intuition, you understand this paralyzing choice. Don't scroll past this, there is a consequence for looking away from the truth. If you won't subscribe and lock in this story right now, I need you to go to the comments and tell me why you would leave me alone in this. Why would you let me walk into this trap? Days later, the feeling never went away. I signed the forms, not because I trusted the idea, but because I trusted him. The new accounts were opened, my new, massive paycheck diverted into a separate stream. I was living in a beautiful, separate financial bubble, convinced by his logic that I was safer. I started paying for the mortgage, the utilities, the bulk of our joint expenses, thinking I was contributing my new, superior share. Thomas covered his business expenses and promised to invest the rest of his income, our old income, for our retirement. I was too drunk on power and ambition to notice the subtle shift. Then came Sunday morning. The one day I let the corporate shield drop. We were having breakfast, the weak sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Thomas was on his phone, which wasn't unusual, but the intensity in his focus was. He was smiling, a slow, private curve of his lips that wasn't meant for me. "Work email?" I asked, reaching for the jam. He flinched, a sharp, almost violent startle. He dropped the phone screen down on the counter. "Yeah, just a client. Big deal closing next week. He went to the fridge for juice, leaving the phone unguarded. A sudden, irresistible impulse, born of that cold fear from days ago, forced my hand. I reached out, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I flipped the phone over. The screen had not locked. It was an open text thread. No client name. Just a heart emoji and one single, damning sentence. I miss your sheets. See you Monday afternoon. I've already moved the funds. I've already moved the funds. The words didn't just confirm an affair. They confirmed an agenda. It wasn't a spontaneous moment of weakness, it was a coordinated, calculated strike. The sheets, the funds, the Monday afternoon rendezvous. Thomas hadn't just separated the accounts for safety. He had been planning an exit, and my promotion, my success, had been the perfect blinding opportunity. He had walled me off financially just before he started to bleed our shared past dry. My body locked down, cold and still, the way an animal does when it knows the trap has sprung. I slid the phone back, my hand steady, every nerve ending screaming. When Thomas came back, smiling, offering me a glass of juice, I looked up at him, and what he saw was the wife he thought he knew. The performance began immediately. My Oscar-winning moment. Sweetheart, you okay? You look pale. Just a headache, honey. Big week ahead. I smiled, a tight, mechanical thing. You know, with the promotion. The lie tasted like ash. I watched him. The concerned furrow in his brow was a mask, a poorly fitted one. Now that I knew how to look beneath it, I needed information. I needed proof. I needed his timeline. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pretended to. Thomas slept the sleep of the truly guilty, his breathing even and deep beside me. I slipped out of bed, navigated the darkness to his home office, and went straight for his laptop. The password was our wedding date. It always was. His text thread with her was wiped clean, of course. He wasn't sloppy. But his business ledger, that was a different story. He'd been managing a few rental properties for years, a small side income. He'd always used a single, messy Excel sheet for everything. I found it instantly. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was geometrical. Line item after line item, spanning the 2 months since my promotion. Payments marked. Vendor fees were actually large, round number cashier's checks. Property maintenance was a substantial deposit into a named, unfamiliar trust account. And then, there it was. A full column labeled, escrow, Coastal View. Coastal View. That was the name of the boutique beach community 3 hours south of us. I remembered him mentioning it, a potential investment opportunity he'd been looking into for the business. But these weren't investment figures. These were down payment installments. He wasn't investing our money. He was buying a life. He had been siphoning the money from our joint savings, the money we had accumulated over 5 years while I was busy drowning in my new responsibilities, footing all our current bills with my new, separate income. He used my success as a shield to orchestrate his escape. He had outsourced his financial duties to me, so he could focus on stealing our past and funding his future with her. It wasn't just cheating. It was fraud. I copied the entire file onto a tiny, unmarked flash drive I kept hidden in my jewelry box. I deleted the recently opened history. When I climbed back into bed, the man beside me felt like a corpse I was forced to share a grave with. My tears were silent, hot trails on my pillow. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, molten vengeance. He had forced my hand. He had reduced our marriage to a transaction. Fine. I was the COO. I understood strategy. I understood leverage. And Thomas had just given me all the data I needed to launch a hostile takeover of his entire, miserable plan. I had to play the part of the devoted, oblivious wife. I had to smile while I dismantled him piece by piece. My strategy had to be precise, untraceable, and undeniable. I needed to know who she was, where Coastal View was, and how to weaponize his own greed against him. I knew the first step had to involve finding the woman who missed his sheets. I spent the next morning creating a ghost profile on a little-known luxury real estate forum. I posted a single, anonymous inquiry, casual and harmless. Anyone know what properties are closing soon in Coastal View, specifically any recent closings handled by a Thomas R. in Washington? The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for the mouse to nibble and pray I hadn't made a single fatal mistake that would let him see the COO behind the housewife's mask. The days that followed were a masterclass in emotional compartmentalization. I was running a multi-million-dollar company by day. And by night, I was running an internal investigation on my own marriage. I kissed Thomas goodbye every morning, the taste of betrayal a copper penny on my tongue. I listened to his fabricated stories about late client calls and unexpected meetings, nodding and offering faux sympathy. Every lie he told was another stone I added to the wall I was building, the one he would eventually crash into. I waited 3 long days for a response on the real estate forum. I kept the laptop open in the periphery of my corporate work, minimizing the private window when my assistant walked by. I was playing a dangerous game of double identity. The alert finally chimed on Thursday afternoon. A private message. Coastal View. Are you referring to the property handled by Anchor Financial? The Thomas are there just closed on a high-end unit last week. Big payout. They say he's moving down there soon. The sale was contingent on the buyer's cosigner having an exceptional credit rating and fast liquidity. She was named Alara. Not just an anonymous text message heart. A name. A financial partner. A cosigner. Thomas hadn't just been having an affair. He had been constructing a second, fully funded life. A life built on the foundations he was actively stealing from our own. And that detail, exceptional credit rating and fast liquidity. That meant Alara wasn't just a mistress. She was a woman of means. This wasn't a cheap affair with a secretary. This was a merger. A hostile, emotional, and financial takeover of my future. I ran her name. It took less than an hour, thanks to my corporate access and a few discreet data broker subscriptions I kept for competitive analysis. Alara Vance. Mid-30s, architect. Her firm had been struggling until recently, just before I got my promotion and Thomas insisted on separating our funds. Coincidence? There were no coincidences in the world of high finance, or, apparently, in betrayal. I found her social media. The posts were innocuous, stark modern interiors, expensive cocktails, cryptic captions, but in the background of a photo Alara had posted 2 weeks ago, a photo of a coffee cup sitting on a polished steel table, tagged future plans. I recognized the chair. The texture of the upholstery, the subtle scratch mark on the leg. It was the chair from Thomas's rental office downtown, the one he insisted I had never been to, the one he claimed was just a sterile, dusty space for meeting property managers. I realized they weren't just planning a life together. They were already living one, right under my nose, in the city where I thought I reigned supreme. I was the COO of a massive corporation, yet I couldn't even manage the small dark secrets hiding 3 blocks from my office. 2 weeks passed. I let the discovery simmer. I continued to play the part of the busy, slightly overwhelmed, successful wife. Thomas was getting arrogant. He'd leave early, come home late, always with the same tired excuse about the big deal closing. His confidence, I realized, was fueled by the belief that I was too successful, too busy, and frankly, too stupid to notice the small, clumsy holes he was tearing in our life. I needed to gather the final, undeniable proof before I made my move. I knew their Monday rendezvous was still scheduled. I called my private investigator contact, Jeff. I'd used him once years ago for corporate intelligence, but I knew he was discreet and ruthlessly effective. I need eyes on Thomas R., I told him, keeping my voice utterly devoid of emotion. Starting Sunday night. I need photographs, video, and a full report on his movements Monday. Every detail. No expense spared. Sunday arrived. It was the same bright, cruel sunlight that had illuminated Thomas's first incriminating text. He was cheerful, almost giddy, talking about going to the gym and then maybe stopping by his office for pre-work prep. Sounds like a plan, honey, I said, kissing him on the cheek, a toxic farewell kiss. I'm taking a long bath and catching up on quarterly reports. Don't worry about me. He was gone by 11 a.m. Jeff's text arrived at 11:30 a.m. He's headed south. Not the gym. Tracking now. I didn't hear from Jeff again for 3 hours. The silence was deafening, amplified by the ticking clock on my wall. I sat on my immaculate white sofa, holding the flash drive with the Coastal View ledger in my hand. I wasn't waiting for confirmation. I was waiting for the evidence that would turn this domestic tragedy into a corporate prosecution. When the text finally came back, it wasn't a photo of Thomas and Alara. It was a single, cryptic video link. I clicked it, my finger trembling for the first time since this started. The video showed Thomas, not with Alara, but standing in front of a massive, heavily guarded corporate building I recognized instantly. It was the headquarters of my company's biggest, most aggressive competitor. And Thomas, my husband, was shaking hands with their CEO, a woman known for her cutthroat tactics and her deep hatred of me. The phone felt heavy, hot, alien in my hand. I watched the grainy video Jeff had sent, over and over. Thomas, my husband, shaking hands with Veronica Stone, the CEO of Trident Global, our most venomous rival. The woman who had spent 5 years trying to poach my clients, derail my projects, and, frankly, destroy my career. This wasn't just adultery. This wasn't even just theft. This was corporate espionage woven into the fabric of my marriage. He hadn't just separated the accounts to leave me. He had done it to compromise me. My promotion, the source of his supposed pride, was actually his instrument. He had walled off my massive new income and, in doing so, created a perfect financial firewall for himself while he simultaneously worked to sabotage the very company that paid for our life. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Thomas wasn't just unfaithful. He was a mole. Alara was likely the distraction, the seaside promise, but the real deal, the high-stakes game, was happening in the cold conference rooms of Trident Global. He was selling my company's secrets, my strategies, my life's work. The puzzle pieces snapped together, sharp and cruel. The separate accounts demand wasn't for equality, it was insulation. He needed his hands clean of my corporate money to avoid suspicion when he transferred Trident's payment or, worse, when the inevitable investigation began into the security breach he was orchestrating. He was not only planning to leave me heartbroken and penniless, he was planning to leave me professionally decimated, potentially liable, standing in the ruins of a collapsing career. He had chosen greed over our vows. He had chosen power over my soul. He looked at me, his wife, the mother of his future children, and saw only a data stream he could monetize. I stood up, the silence of the empty house pressing in on me. I walked to the kitchen, the spot where I had first found his text, and I laughed. A hollow, ugly sound that caught in my throat. The heartbreak evaporated. In its place, a crystalline, cold rage settled in. The rules had changed. This wasn't a divorce. This was a war for survival. And in my world, the world of COOs and billion-dollar contracts, you don't fight a war with tears, you fight it with leverage. I immediately texted Jeff. Forget Alara and the beach. Focus everything on Trident Global. I need all data on his point of contact, Veronica Stone. Specifically, any information on her current projects, especially those relating to DC regulatory affairs. Thomas was still several hours away. I had a window. I went straight to my home office, the one Thomas never entered because he respected my corporate privacy, and opened my work terminal. I bypassed the two-factor authentication with a routine override code only senior executives knew. I didn't hesitate. Thomas had violated the sanctity of my home. I was about to violate the sanctity of his professional life. I knew Trident Global was trying to undercut us on the massive Northern Virginia data center bid, a project that would redefine the company's decade. The bid was highly classified. Thomas must have been feeding them our proprietary pricing models, maybe even our technical specifications. I needed proof, not just that he met Veronica Stone, but what he gave her. I navigated Thomas's rental business server, the same server that held the Coastal View ledger. It was a poorly secured cloud system. I found a hidden folder, disguised as Q4 tax documents. Inside, a sequence of encrypted files. The file names were dates, all corresponding to the days Thomas had claimed to be working late. I cracked the first one. It was a draft of our company's data center acquisition proposal, annotated with Thomas's handwritten margins. Cost estimate too high, target 10% lower. Use the Shell Corp for bidding transparency. He wasn't just betraying me. He was about to cost my company billions. The stakes were impossibly high. If I exposed him now, I would destroy my life, but I would save my company. But what if I didn't just expose him? What if I let him continue just long enough for him to deliver the final, most devastating secret to Trident Global, giving me the ultimate proof and the opportunity for maximum counter-leverage? I had to decide, play defense, or risk everything on a final, deadly offensive move. I took a deep breath, looking at the encrypted file that contained the final, secret regulatory filing. The one that could legally bury both Thomas and Veronica Stone. I decided. I wouldn't stop him. I would let him walk into his own trap. But first, I had to ensure that Alara Vance, the architect of his new life, was pulled into the epicenter of the destruction. I opened the Coastal View ledger and began to modify the documents, meticulously changing the names on the ownership and debt structures. He thought he was building a golden life with Alara. I was about to make them co-owners of a ticking time bomb. My next few days were characterized by a chilling efficiency. The emotional paralysis had broken, replaced by the relentless drive of a machine executing a complex protocol. I continued to play the role of the devoted COO, pulling late nights. But the true work was happening in the shadows of my home office. Thomas believed he was untouchable. His arrogance grew daily. He started talking about the need for me to step back from my demanding job, suggesting that his financial investments were about to pay off so handsomely that I could afford to relax. He was essentially asking me to be the good, quiet wife while he sold me out. I smiled and agreed. That sounds wonderful, honey. A break would be nice. Every agreement was a dagger I was twisting into his future. My immediate focus was on the Coastal View property and leveraging Alara. I realized that Thomas, in his haste and greed, had tied himself to Alara not just emotionally but financially, and in a way that made her a liability to his corporate scheme. The property closing was the knot I could use to tighten the noose. I instructed Jeff to focus not on photos, but on public record filings related to the Coastal View deed and mortgage documents. I discovered that Alara, despite her exceptional credit, had very little liquid capital. Thomas had secured the property using a complex, aggressive financing structure. A large bridge loan secured against his business assets, with Alara's signature as a personal guarantor on a smaller, secondary note. This meant if the business assets Thomas was using as collateral suddenly vanished or became legally compromised, Alara would be holding the debt. And Thomas's business assets were, in reality, the joint savings he had funneled into his business accounts before demanding the separate finances. The plan took shape, sharp and brutal. I needed two things. 1. To prove Thomas was selling my company's secrets to Trident. 2. To ensure that when his financial world collapsed, Alara was left in the direct line of fire, destroying his golden parachute. I started sending anonymous, untraceable emails to several mid-level managers at Thomas's small financial firm. The emails were vague but pointed. Check your Q4 ledger. Something isn't adding up with the Coastal View asset bridge loan. Looks like a misclassification of collateral. My goal wasn't to expose him immediately, but to sow seeds of doubt, ensuring that when the hammer finally fell, his own colleagues would be the ones to point the finger at his financial malpractice. I needed the fire to start from within his own fortress. Meanwhile, I used my COO access to initiate an internal high-level audit on our company's security protocols, specifically targeting digital communications with outside competitors. I placed myself in charge of the investigation, giving me both visibility and control over the timeline. The lack of feeling was the most disturbing part. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was performing a surgical procedure. I ate dinner with Thomas, talked about our day, and sometimes, he would even reach for my hand across the table. When he did, I saw not the man I married, but the enemy I was about to execute. The emotional connection had been severed by his greed, leaving me free to act without conscience. The internal audit was progressing exactly as planned. My team was isolating the compromised data stream, the one Thomas was using to leak the data center bid. I guided them to look for anomalies in peripheral systems, far from where Thomas would suspect. I knew the final, most devastating leak was scheduled for the upcoming Sunday, his designated work day at the office, just before the bid deadline. I finalized my counterstrike. I scheduled a highly confidential meeting with the CEO of my company, Mr. Harrison, for Monday morning, 8 a.m. I prepared 3 folders: the financial ledger, proof of Thomas's theft from our joint accounts and the Coastal View debt structure; the corporate files, the Trident Global video and the annotated data center proposal drafts; the counterleverage plan, a strategy to use Trident's compromised data to secure the Northern Virginia data center bid, effectively turning Thomas's treason into an asset. That Saturday night, Thomas came home early, feeling celebratory. "Honey, this is it," he announced, pouring himself a bourbon. "I'm putting the finishing touches on the big deal tomorrow." Monday morning, our life changes. He raised his glass to me. I raised mine back. "To our future, Thomas," I said, looking him straight in his lying eyes. He didn't know that my future involved a detailed 8 a.m. presentation on Monday, and that he was the primary subject. He had one more night of blissful ignorance. And I had a decision to make about that encrypted regulatory filing, the one that could send him and Alara to jail. Should I use it to destroy him completely or keep it hidden for my ultimate power? I decided I needed a witness, someone who understood the depth of the deception. I didn't want him to simply vanish. I wanted him to see the mirror when his life shattered. Sunday morning broke with a deceptive calm. Thomas was chipper, almost manic. He was meticulously dressed, talking about the critical nature of his final meeting at the office. Every word was a lie, every gesture, a performance. I watched him gather his briefcase, the same briefcase that likely held the final, sensitive data stolen from my company, and felt a chilling sense of control. "Call me when you're done, honey," I said, giving him a kiss that felt like signing a death warrant. "Will do, love. See you tonight. Maybe we'll celebrate." Celebrate. The irony was a bitter cocktail I was forced to drink. He left at 10 a.m., the countdown had officially begun. My first small victory came almost immediately. I didn't call Jeff. I called the property manager for Thomas's rental properties, a woman named Carol I'd met once at a company picnic. "Carol, I need a massive favor," I started, keeping my tone distressed but professional. "Thomas left in a hurry this morning, and he needs a specific legal document from his office safe. It's for a last-minute closing on that Coastal View property. I can't get the keys. Could you possibly go down and retrieve it? I'll authorize a bonus for you." Carol, sympathetic to the stressed executive's wife, agreed instantly. Thomas hadn't changed the locks on the rental office, assuming I had no reason to ever go there. He hadn't realized that I knew exactly what was happening in that office. My true goal wasn't the document. It was planting the seed of panic. I knew Carol would see Thomas's laptop out, possibly open. The very act of a third party needing to access his private closing documents would interrupt his flow and introduce anxiety into his highly pressurized betrayal ritual. 30 minutes later, Carol called me back. "I got the document, Mrs. R. But Mr. R's laptop was open, and a man from a courier service just showed up, asking for a package addressed to Trident. I told him Mr. R. wasn't ready yet." "Is everything okay, Trident?" My blood went cold, but my voice remained warm. "It's fine, Carol. Just a small mix-up with a client of mine. Thank you so much. You saved me." The fact that Thomas was having a courier deliver the final package to Trident proved two things: his paranoia about digital tracking, and that the physical transfer of corporate secrets was imminent. He was finalizing the job right now. But the courier delay, that was the crucial buffer. He now had to contact the courier, reschedule, and redo his encryption process, delaying his timeline by at least an hour. This was the window I needed. I opened my laptop and pulled up the most devastating piece of ammunition I held: the encrypted regulatory filing. This file was the technical Achilles heel of the Northern Virginia data center project. If exposed, it wouldn't just compromise my company. It would trigger a massive regulatory review of Trident Global, whose CEO, Veronica Stone, had deliberately skirted these compliance issues. I knew Thomas was intending to deliver this exact file to Veronica, using it as his grand finale to secure his position at Trident. My strategy was simple: substitution. I created a fake, meticulously crafted document. It looked exactly like the regulatory filing, same file size, same encryption signature, but the contents were a trap. It contained a self-destructing macro tied to a non-existent shell corporation. If Trident tried to use it, the file would not only fail to load, but it would simultaneously trigger an anonymous electronic flag directly to the D.C. Corporate Fraud Task Force, implicating Trident in attempting to use a fabricated shell entity for corporate misrepresentation. I logged into Thomas's system using the backdoor I had established weeks ago. I found the final file destined for the courier, the real, devastating corporate secret. With surgeon-like precision, I deleted the original and uploaded my fake, booby-trapped version, giving it the exact same name and timestamp. The file was now a ticking time bomb pointed straight at Trident Global, and by extension, at Thomas. He wouldn't know the difference. The file structure looked perfect. The trap was set, not just to catch him, but to catch his new employers as well. I sat back, the adrenaline draining away, leaving behind a cold, hard satisfaction. I had replaced the bomb he was planning to throw at me with one that would detonate in his own hands. Now, I needed the final piece of my justice, the witness. I picked up my phone and called the one person Thomas valued more than anyone, the one person who needed to see the complete truth before it destroyed them both. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a friend. It was Elara Vance, the architect of the Coastal View dream. Elara, I said, my voice calm as glass. My name is narrator name. I think you need to come to Washington right now. Your future is being sold out from under you. And the man doing it is Thomas. The call with Elara was short, sharp, and terrifyingly effective. She reacted exactly as I predicted, with immediate, defensive denial, followed by icy fear. She tried to hang up 3 times. Each time, I pulled her back with a single, undeniable piece of information. He told you the mortgage was fully secured by his business, didn't he? Check the small print on the secondary note, Elara, the one you signed. It's a personal guarantee, contingent on the valuation of his largest client, a valuation that is about to drop to 0 when the FBI reviews his assets. I didn't need to threaten her. I only needed to present the evidence that Thomas had leveraged her future as collateral for his escape. The silence on her end, finally, was acceptance. She agreed to take the next train north. She was coming to Washington not as his partner but as my unwilling, desperate witness. I had positioned all the pieces. Thomas was completing his treason, ignorant that the evidence he was about to deliver was tainted. Elara was racing toward the truth that would shatter her carefully planned second life. And my CEO was scheduled for a massive reveal on Monday morning. All the strings were taut, ready to snap, but the most significant part of the major betrayal twist was still unspooling. Jeff's final report on Veronica Stone and Trident Global landed in my inbox. The file wasn't about her professional failures. It was intensely personal. Veronica Stone, the ice queen of corporate warfare, had a fragile secret, a serious, undisclosed health condition requiring high-cost experimental treatment. More importantly, she was locked in a brutal custody battle with her ex-husband, a battle that hinged entirely on her ability to maintain her public image of stability and solvency. And then, the kicker. Veronica Stone's ex-husband was represented by the same high-powered, ruthless divorce attorney Thomas had quietly been researching and had retained since my promotion. I wasn't just facing a cheating husband and a corporate rival. I was facing an alliance. Thomas wasn't working for Veronica Stone. He was working with her. This was a mutually destructive pact. Thomas delivered my company's secrets to weaken me and secure his own financial foundation, while Veronica used Thomas's detailed personal knowledge of my life and finances and his willingness to commit espionage to gain leverage in her own legal battles and corporate ambitions. The separate accounts, the Coastal View house, the affair with Elara, it was all a complex web designed to isolate and then financially annihilate me, while simultaneously giving Veronica an invaluable corporate win. They were 2 predators hunting the same prey. The realization was liberating. I wasn't married to a man. I was married to an elaborate, self-serving corporate mechanism. I had 20 minutes before Elara's train arrived. I had to ensure she understood her role in the play. I met her at Union Station. She stepped off the train, looking pale, expensive, and terrified. "Who are you?" she demanded, gripping her suitcase handle like a shield. "I'm the woman whose life Thomas used to buy yours," I said, leading her toward a waiting car. In the car, I didn't mince words. I showed her the Coastal View ledger, the original, unedited one that proved Thomas had siphoned the money from our joint account. Then, I showed her the secondary note with her signature, the one making her personally liable if Thomas's business assets were compromised. "He told you he loved you, Elara. But he made you his fall guy. When the FBI investigates Thomas's theft from my corporate accounts, which they will Monday morning, his business assets, including that bridge loan, will be frozen. You, Elara, will be left holding a $500,000 debt on a shell corporation in Coastal View. And Thomas will be long gone, covered by his new deal with Trident." Her composure broke, her face went slack with shock and then hardened into a mirror of my own cold fury. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered, the architect suddenly looking utterly defeated. "I want you to be a witness," I said, pulling the car over outside my dark, quiet Georgetown home. "I want you to be here when Thomas comes home tonight, celebrating his victory. I want you to look him in the eye and watch him realize that his elaborate plan to destroy me has left him standing, not with a mistress and a beach house, but with a corporate felony, a worthless asset, and a debt partner who knows every single truth. He's bringing a USB stick home tonight, a backup of his final data transfer. I want you to get it. And I want you to remember that your future depends entirely on him failing, utterly, and completely. The silence in the car was broken only by Elara's ragged breathing. She was a woman who had just realized she wasn't a muse. She was a tool, discarded after use. The raw shock had curdled into a palpable need for retribution. The USB stick, she managed, her voice barely a rasp. Why? You already have the information. Because I need the untainted original to present to the CEO tomorrow, I explained, my tone clinical. The one he physically brought home, the one that proves intent and possession, the one I replaced on his server is the distraction. The one he has on his person is the prosecution. And I need you, Elara, to hand it to me. You do this, and you cooperate fully testify to the coercion and fraud he forced upon you regarding the Coastal View property, and I will ensure the debt is restructured in a way that minimizes your liability. I won't save him. But I might save you. Refuse, and you're his co-conspirator, holding the bag for his financial crimes. Elara nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. The architect was back, now designing revenge. I led her into the house, avoiding the main living areas. We settled in the rarely used guest room upstairs. I gave her strict instructions. Act overwhelmed, act heartbroken, but most importantly, act oblivious to the corporate crime. Thomas needed to believe she was only focused on the emotional fallout, making him drop his guard regarding the much bigger corporate theft. My own task was to prepare the final staging. I retrieved the 3 folders: financial, corporate, counter-leverage. I went through them one last time, ensuring every date, every signature, and every asset valuation was meticulously organized. I wanted no holes, no ambiguities, no room for Thomas's practice charm to wiggle out of the truth. The most difficult part was the final layer of my strategy, the reversal of assets. I contacted my personal financial advisor, a woman who specialized in high-net-worth divorce cases, telling her I had an emergency filing that needed to be completed before 7 a.m. Monday. The filing was a temporary restraining order on Thomas's remaining personal assets, classifying them under martial law as proceeds of corporate fraud and misappropriated marital property. Crucially, I ensured the filing included an affidavit stating that the massive debt from the Coastal View property was secured using stolen marital funds and compromised business collateral. This meant that when the debt came due, and Thomas's business assets were frozen by the FBI following my tip-off, the liability would immediately fall to the secondary guarantor. Elara. I didn't do this to punish Elara. I did it to force Thomas to make a choice. If he truly loved Elara, he would confess and protect her. If he was truly the financial parasite I knew him to be, he would sacrifice her without a second thought, confirming his nature to everyone involved. 7:30 p.m. Thomas's sedan pulled into the driveway. The lights flashed. He was home. I stood in the hallway, adjusting my expression from busy COO to tired, waiting wife. I gave Elara a final look, a look that said, "Your life depends on this performance." He walked in, smelling of expensive cologne and cheap Triumph. He kissed me, a quick, possessive peck. "Long day, darling. But worth it. The final deal is done. Our financial future is secured." "That's wonderful, honey," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "There's someone here, Thomas. She came to see you. She needs to talk to you about Coastal View." I stepped aside, revealing Elara standing in the gloom of the dining room archway. Thomas's face went white. All the composure, the corporate mask, the practiced deceit, it evaporated instantly. He looked like a man who had just walked into a room where the bomb he planted was sitting on the table, counting down. "Elara? What are you doing here?" He stammered, his eyes darting wildly, first to Elara, then to me, then finally settling on his briefcase, which he still clutched tightly. The USB stick was inside. I watched him. The terror in his eyes wasn't about the affair. It was about the money. And I knew, right then, that the battle was already won. The only thing left was the detonation. Thomas recovered fast, falling back on instinct, denial, and aggression. He dropped the briefcase, the one containing the evidence, with a dull thud and stepped forward, his eyes burning with controlled fury. "What is this, Elara? Did you follow me? And you?" He pivoted to me, his voice a low, dangerous growl. What kind of game are you playing? You bring her into our home? No game, Thomas, I replied, moving slowly to stand beside Alara, linking my arm through hers, a silent declaration of alliance that visibly rattled him. Just honesty. Alara is here because you leveraged her into a $500,000 debt on the Coastal View property. Using money you stole from our joint marital assets. She wants an explanation. He laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Stealing? That's my business account. And Alara, we discussed the secondary note. It's boilerplate. My wife is just jealous, Alara. She can't stand that my success might outpace hers, so she's making up insane stories about my investments. His strategy was clear. Play the wronged, successful businessman whose controlling wife was having a breakdown over a simple affair. But Alara had seen the ledger. The ledger shows transfers, Thomas. Large, round figures, labeled vendor fees that match the exact down payments on Coastal View. Those dates align with the weeks following your insistence on separate accounts. The money came from the account we closed, the one you promised was for retirement. Thomas's composure finally snapped. He couldn't deny the ledger, not when he thought only I had seen it. His eyes narrowed on Alara, and the mask of the loving partner fell away completely, revealing the cold, financial predator underneath. You stupid girl. You think I was going to let her have that money? It was mine to take. And you, Alara, you signed the papers. If you open your mouth, you'll be the one investigated for financial fraud. I own the primary asset. You own the debt. That was it. The final confirmation. He didn't defend his love. He defended his asset protection strategy. He was willing to sacrifice Alara on the altar of his greed without a moment's hesitation. I stepped in, my voice cutting through the rising hysteria. You don't own anything anymore, Thomas. You own a single briefcase, lying right there. I pointed to the leather bag near the door. And inside that briefcase is the final proof that you are not just a cheating husband but a corporate felon. He blinked, confused, the corporate accusation finally penetrating the fog of his domestic panic. What are you talking about? My briefcase holds documents for my new client. It holds the USB stick, I clarified, taking another step closer. The one containing the proprietary data center regulatory filing you copied from my system, and were paid to deliver to Veronica Stone at Trident Global. The change in his expression was immediate, horrifying. The blood drained from his face entirely. The affair was a distraction. The money was motivation. But the corporate espionage that was the third rail, that was prison time, SEC investigation, and total financial ruin. You don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his eyes darting toward the briefcase as if it were a bomb he needed to defuse. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, Thomas, I countered, enjoying the sickening, slow realization dawning in his eyes. I know you met Veronica Stone. I know she hired you to leak my company's bid strategy. And I know that tomorrow, Monday morning, at 8 a.m., I am presenting this entire file, the financial theft, the corporate espionage, and the partnership with Veronica, to my CEO, Mr. Harrison. He lunged for the briefcase. Alara, reacting instantly, kicked it away, sending it sliding across the hardwood floor toward the kitchen. Thomas stared at us both, his two victims turned unified prosecutors. He had leveraged Alara's future. I had leveraged his arrogance. The realization that I wasn't just crying but calculating was the final, devastating blow. He was completely trapped. You can't ruin me, he snarled, a cornered animal. I still have leverage. I still have the documents. I just smiled, a cold, empty expression. You think that's the real version you put on the server today, Thomas? Go ahead. Check your courier package. You've already delivered the trap, and it's set to detonate on Trident Global when they try to open it. The air thickened with Thomas's sheer, unadulterated panic. The color of his rage had shifted from arrogance to survival. He lunged for the briefcase again, ignoring Alara and me entirely. The briefcase now represented his last shred of control, his proof of competence, his only way out of a corporate fraud charge. I didn't stop him. I let him seize the case, his hands trembling as he struggled with the combination lock. It doesn't matter, Thomas, I continued, my voice measured. The damage is done. The courier has your booby-trapped file. The restraining order on your remaining assets will be filed at dawn, and Alara has seen the evidence of your financial coercion. He finally got the case open, fumbling inside. He pulled out the black USB drive, the one containing the pristine, original stolen data he was supposed to use as a backup. He looked at it, then at me, the connection snapping into place. "You want this?" he gasped, holding the small drive aloft. "You want your secret data? Fine. You can have it, when you drop the charges against me. When you agree to a clean, non-disclosure, non-disparagement, divorce settlement, with alimony." He was bargaining for his freedom using my company's secrets as a shield. It was the lowest form of corporate hostage negotiation done in our own living room. He truly believed I was still the wife who would cave to his demands, protecting her career and reputation at the expense of justice. He thought he could barter his way out of treason. "I don't want it, Thomas," I said, taking a deliberate step back. "Alara wants it. She wants the evidence that proves you used her financial instability to co-sign debt you had no intention of servicing. The truth, Thomas. That's all she needs." I turned to Alara. "Show him, Alara." Alara didn't hesitate. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, silver recording device I had given her. The device's tiny red light was blinking steadily, capturing every panicked, damning word Thomas had uttered since walking through the door. "I have everything," Thomas, Alara said, her voice now completely steady, fortified by rage. "Every lie. Every threat. Every admission of theft and fraud. You signed papers saying you'd protect me. I recorded you saying you'd sacrifice me." The sight of the recorder stripped Thomas of his last pretense of control. He roared a sound of pure, unbridled fury and despair and hurled the USB drive across the room. It bounced off the wall with a sharp clatter and slid under the heavy oak buffet. He didn't notice the drive. He was focused entirely on the recorder. He lunged at Alara. I stepped between them, blocking his path. "Don't touch her, Thomas. It's over." My phone, sitting on the kitchen counter, began to ring. The screen flashed. "Mr. Harrison, CEO." I walked slowly to the phone and answered, putting it on speakerphone, a final devastating tactical move. "Mr. Harrison? I apologize for the time. This is urgent." Thomas froze mid-lunge. His world had just shrunk to the 3 feet between him and the voice of his employer's CEO, now accidentally listening to the detonation of his marriage and his criminal enterprise. "Yes, what is it?" Mr. Harrison's voice was crisp and professional. "Sir, I am calling from home. My internal audit proved correct. I have uncovered a major security breach. My husband, Thomas R., has been working in partnership with Veronica Stone at Trident Global to steal the regulatory filings for the data center bid. He successfully delivered a compromised file today. I have the untainted backup of the stolen data, and 2 witnesses to his explicit admission of corporate espionage and financial fraud." The silence from the speakerphone was monumental. Thomas stood paralyzed, his eyes wide with horror, listening to his career and freedom being meticulously dismantled by the woman he thought he had outsmarted. "I need you to contact the FBI's Economic Crimes Division immediately, sir," I continued, my voice unwavering, directing my CEO. "We need an extraction team here. Now, to secure the evidence. I am placing Thomas R. under house arrest until their arrival. I will handle the press release by 9 a.m. Thomas looked at the phone, then at me. His fate was sealed, delivered through the speaker of his wife's mobile phone. The moment I hung up, the controlled silence shattered. Thomas let out a choked guttural cry, not of sorrow, but of pure, white-hot, cornered desperation. "You called him? You actually called your CEO? You ruined me. You ruined everything." He advanced on me, but I didn't flinch. Alara stepped back, holding the recorder tight to her chest. "You ruined us, Thomas," I stated, my voice cutting through his panic. "I just collected the evidence. For 5 years, I worked myself into the ground building a life for us. And when I finally succeeded, you saw not a partner, but a mark. You saw a source of capital to fund your mistress and your beachfront escape. You saw my promotion as your biggest opportunity for theft." He stopped short, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a sudden, sickening collapse into tears. He wasn't crying for the marriage, he was crying for the life he just lost. "No, wait. It wasn't like that. The promotion, it just changed everything. I felt redundant. You were making so much more. Veronica, she made me feel powerful again. She said she could offer me a place, a future where I wasn't just Mr. Narrator name. She made it sound so easy, so simple. She manipulated your ego, Thomas, I finished for him, contempt dripping from every word, and you let her turn you into a common thief and a corporate informant. She exploited your fear of being overshadowed, and you exploited my trust to pay for her favor. He dropped to his knees, clutching my dress, looking up at me with an expression of manufactured remorse that no longer held any power. Please don't do this, he pleaded, his voice thick with tears. We can fix this. I'll confess the affair. I'll send Alara away. I'll tell Harrison it was all a misunderstanding, that I was blackmailed. We can start over. We have years' history. Please, for our future. I looked down at the man who had been my husband. The irony of his words for our future was staggering. He was pleading for forgiveness for the emotional betrayal, completely ignoring the felony he had committed against my company. He still didn't understand the true nature of his crime. There is no our future, Thomas, I said, pulling my skirt free of his grasp. The man I married died the day he prioritized a separate bank account over our vows. The man kneeling here is a risk, a liability, and a criminal. Alara stepped forward, holding the recorder out. You're still lying, Thomas, she said, her voice a whip crack. You didn't do this because you felt redundant. You did this because you're a predator. You knew exactly what you were doing when you made me co-sign the debt. You were setting me up to be the scapegoat. You weren't just planning to leave her. You were planning to ruin her and steal my freedom in the process. Thomas glared at Alara, his false tears drying instantly. Shut up, you conniving little architect. You wanted the luxury. You took the risk. That venomous outburst was the final emotional barrier breaking down. He hadn't just confessed his contempt for me. He had revealed his complete and total lack of respect for the woman he claimed to love. He valued his escape above everything and everyone. I looked at Alara. She looked back at me. We were two women, betrayed by the same financial cruelty, now united in the pursuit of justice. Alara, go retrieve the USB drive under the buffet. I instructed, my voice calm again. Now the COO issuing a command. Thomas, the FBI will be here within the hour. You need to decide whether you want to wait for them here, or be apprehended on the street running from a federal fraud investigation. Thomas collapsed back onto the floor, defeated. Alara returned, holding the small USB drive in her palm, the final piece of tangible evidence, the actual corporate secret. As the quiet hum of an approaching car, likely federal agents, began to echo faintly from the street, Thomas looked up at me one last time, a pathetic, burning question in his eyes. The restraining order. Did you leave me anything? I looked down at him, my expression blank. I left you exactly what you earned, Thomas. Nothing. The approaching car sounds grew louder, cutting through the strained silence of the living room. Thomas scrambled backward, not toward the front door, but toward the relative safety of the kitchen, his mind still cycling through desperate exit strategies. This is kidnapping. This is entrapment, he hissed, grasping at legal straws. It's a holding pattern, Thomas, I corrected, my eyes fixed on the front window. And you have two witnesses who will attest to your voluntary admission of crimes. Sit down. Before the federal agents could even reach the porch, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Jeff, my private investigator. I frowned, answering on a low volume. What is it, Jeff? I told you, stand down until Monday morning. Ma'am, I have a complication. Jeff's voice was tight, urgent. I followed Veronica Stone from Trident. She didn't go home. She went straight to the D.C. police precinct. She's filing a report. My breath hitched. Veronica Stone was moving fast. Her report wasn't about the corporate espionage, she wouldn't dare expose that. It was about me. What is she claiming? I demanded, my voice barely audible. She's claiming that Thomas contacted her. Distraught, claiming you, his powerful COO wife, are mentally unstable, controlling his finances, and threatening him with corporate ruin to prevent him from leaving the marriage, Jeff relayed. She's trying to paint you as the villain. Initiating the separate accounts to fund a private scheme, and trying to frame him to protect your position. She got ahead of me. Veronica Stone, the Ice Queen, was using the only weapon stronger than corporate documents, narrative. She was turning my calculated justice into a paranoid domestic dispute, muddying the waters and attempting to discredit my testimony before the FBI even arrived. If Thomas collaborated with her story, the corporate evidence could look like a retaliatory frame-up. I hung up, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a PR war. And Veronica had drawn first blood. I looked at Thomas, who was watching me with hopeful malevolence. He had his out a way to claim victimization and paint me as the unstable aggressor. That was your partner, wasn't it? I asked him, my voice dangerously soft. Veronica Stone. She's at the police station right now, filing a report claiming I'm having a mental breakdown and trying to frame you. Thomas hesitated. His face flickered with a raw, predatory glee. If that's the story, I'll back it up. She's right. You're insane. You are obsessed with control. Before I could counter, Alara, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped forward. No, you won't, she said, her voice quiet but ringing with conviction. Thomas stared at her, confused. Alara, don't be a fool. This is our escape route. We tell them she's crazy, we both walk free. You get the house, I get my life back. Alara shook her head slowly. The loyalty I expected her to have to Thomas's escape plan was instead directed toward the truth. I won't lie for you, Thomas, she stated firmly. Not after seeing how easily you were going to throw me to the banks. I saw the documents. I heard the recording. I know the truth. And I'm not going to let you victimize her just to save your own skin. She is telling the truth, and I will be her witness. That was the most crucial victory of the entire night. Thomas had counted on his charm or her fear to secure Alara's loyalty. He failed on both counts. Alara, the mistress, had become my unexpected, devastating champion of justice. The first set of headlights, sharp and blue, flashed through the living room window. The FBI had arrived. I walked over to Thomas, who was utterly defeated, his head in his hands. You have 1 minute, Thomas, I said. My voice low enough that the approaching agents couldn't hear. You can tell the FBI that Veronica Stone coerced you into corporate espionage and that Alara and I discovered the plot and are cooperating fully. You get reduced charges and Alara gets protection from the debt. Or you can stick to Veronica's lie, claim I'm crazy, and face the full force of federal fraud charges, corporate sabotage, and the loss of Alara's freedom. The doorbell rang a loud, insistent chime. Thomas looked up at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying mix of hatred and terror. He looked at Alara, who stood strong, holding the recorder like a cross. He had to choose between his pride and his survival, between defending Veronica Stone and saving Alara. The house. He croaked. If I cooperate, do I get to keep the Georgetown house? I shook my head slowly. You lost the house when you demanded separate accounts, Thomas. Now, answer the door. Your execution begins now. The ringing doorbell was relentless, a soundtrack to the end of Thomas's carefully constructed life. I walked to the door and opened it, revealing 2 solemn, sharply dressed men, Special Agent Hayes and Special Agent Vance, with vests confirming their federal status. Mrs. R., Agent Hayes stated, his eyes sweeping the elegant but tense living room. We are here regarding a matter of corporate fraud and potential espionage. I'm cooperating fully, Agent, I responded, stepping aside. The suspect, Thomas R., is in the living room. I have the evidence, the stolen corporate filing and a full confession recorded by my witness, Miss Alara Vance. The agents were calm, professional, and entirely focused on Thomas. They bypassed me and Alara, moving directly toward the man hunched in the corner. Thomas, seeing the sheer gravity of the situation, the uniforms, the authority, the lack of negotiation, finally broke. It was Veronica Stone. Thomas blurted out, his voice cracking with panic. She manipulated me. She promised me a position at Trident if I gave her the data center bid details. I replaced the file on the server with a corrupted version, I swear. I still have the original data. Agent Hayes ignored his desperate rant, reading him his rights and securing the USB drive Alara handed over. Agent Vance, meanwhile, took Alara aside to begin her witness statement, validating the recording and the financial coercion. As the agents led a defeated Thomas out the front door, handcuffed and utterly silent, Agent Hayes paused. He looked at me, a flicker of something assessing in his eyes. We received a prior report, Mrs. R., from the D.C. police filed by Miss Veronica Stone. She claims you are unstable and attempting to frame Mr. R. Agent, I anticipated this. I said, handing him the folder containing the Trident Global file and the annotated data center proposal. Thomas was working with Miss Stone. This folder contains evidence of their collusion, proof of the shell company she intended to use for the bid. And the booby-trapped file Thomas delivered today, a file designed to trigger a corporate fraud investigation on Trident when they attempt to open it. Miss Stone isn't trying to protect Thomas. She's trying to discredit the only person who can expose her own regulatory crimes. Agent Hayes took the folder. He didn't need to open it. He just needed to know I had the counter leverage. Understood, Mrs. R. We will handle the D.C. police report. Your priority should be Monday morning's board meeting. Miss Stone will move fast to use this chaos against your company. After the door closed and the sirens faded into the night, Alara and I stood in the wreckage of my living room, bathed in the sudden, absolute silence. We were both drained, but a strange, quiet victory had settled between us. Alara looked down at the floor, then back at me. He told me he loved me. He was going to leave everything behind for me. I nodded. He told me he loved me too, Alara. But he didn't love either of us. He loved solvency. And that's the real secret of the betrayal. Thomas wasn't working with Veronica Stone. He was working for his father. Alara looked up, stunned. His father? What are you talking about? Thomas's father, Richard R., lost everything to my CEO, Mr. Harrison. 20 years ago, a devastating corporate loss that bankrupted his family name. Thomas has been obsessed with reversing that failure ever since. Veronica Stone didn't hire him. Richard R. financed the entire scheme, the rental properties, the separate accounts, the Coastal View house, even the partnership with Veronica as his son's final, private revenge against Harrison and our company. He used the affair with Alara as the perfect smokescreen. I pulled out the final piece of evidence from my lockbox, a cryptic, decades-old document Jeff had dug up. It was a promissory note, signed by Richard R., detailing a repayment schedule contingent upon the successful acquisition of proprietary data from Harrison's Corp. Thomas wasn't seeking freedom. He was seeking familial validation, I concluded, my voice heavy with the finality of the truth. And Richard R. promised him that validation, using my success as the weapon. I looked at Alara, whose face now held not just betrayal, but deep comprehension. Thomas was a pawn in a decades-old vendetta. And now, the true mastermind, Richard R., is still free. Our fight isn't over. The early morning light began to filter through the windows, painting the chaos of the living room in cold silver. Alara sat across from me, studying the old promissory note signed by Richard R. The revelation that Thomas was driven by decades of inherited resentment, rather than just simple greed, added a chilling layer to the entire affair. So, Richard R. is the puppet master, Alara summarized, her voice steady. He funded Thomas to sabotage your company as revenge against your CEO, Mr. Harrison. Exactly, I confirmed. And Veronica Stone was the weapon. She helped Thomas infiltrate, expecting to reap the corporate rewards. Now that Thomas is in federal custody and the Trident file is a bomb, Veronica will turn on Richard R. to save herself. But Richard R. will simply dissolve his shell companies and disappear. I needed to strike Richard R. now, before he could execute his own escape plan. And my weapon was the man he trusted most, Thomas. I called Agent Hayes at the FBI field office, speaking quickly and clearly. Agent Thomas R. did not act alone. His father, Richard R., financed and orchestrated the entire corporate espionage plot as revenge against my CEO. I have proof, a promissory note linking the Coastal View funding to the data theft. I offered a deal. If Richard R. is charged with conspiracy and financial fraud, I will ensure my company's evidence against Thomas is presented in a way that allows for maximum leniency, given the coercion. Agent Hayes was cautious. But the inclusion of an inherited vendetta and high-level conspiracy was too juicy for the feds to ignore. He agreed to pull Thomas in for immediate, follow-up questioning, focusing entirely on his father's involvement. Meanwhile, my own retaliation against Veronica Stone had already begun. I logged into my secure corporate communications portal and sent a highly encrypted, anonymous message to a specific, influential financial reporter at the Washington Post. The content was precise. A tip about a looming internal FBI investigation into Trident Global, specifically mentioning unstable, high-risk assets tied to a new, secret acquisition bid. I didn't mention Veronica by name, or even my company. I just planted the seed of financial instability. By 7:30 a.m., when the markets opened, the mere rumor of an FBI probe combined with the failure of the booby-trapped file Thomas delivered would cause Trident Global's stock to plummet, severely damaging Veronica's credibility and her custody battle claims. Her public image, her only shield, was gone. As the first reports started trickling in small, cryptic financial blogs speculating about Trident's troubles, Alara and I were already in my car, heading downtown. "Where are we going?" Alara asked, clutching her bag. "We are going to make a crucial delivery," I explained. "The FBI has the corporate data, but we need to ensure Mr. Harrison, my CEO, understands the full scope of the personal betrayal, the vendetta." We arrived at my company's headquarters precisely at 7:55 a.m., 5 minutes before my scheduled meeting with Mr. Harrison. I walked into his spacious, silent office, Alara following behind me. Mr. Harrison looked exhausted, already fielding calls about the Trident rumors. "I know what happened, narrator name," he said, his voice grim. "The FBI confirmed the espionage. You saved us, but at a terrible personal cost." "The cost was calculated, sir," I replied, placing Richard R.'s promissory note on his massive mahogany desk. "The betrayal wasn't about money. It was about revenge. Thomas's father financed this entire operation to destroy you, going back 20 years. I stepped back, allowing the CEO to read the details of the decades-old financial vendetta. "And Alara," I added, gesturing to the silent woman beside me. "She is Thomas's co-conspirator in debt, but my witness in truth. She is the first casualty of his greed. I need your assurance, sir, that you will protect her from the Coastal View debt, and that you will support the FBI in pursuing Richard R. with the same force used against his son." Mr. Harrison looked up from the note, his eyes hard and cold, fixed on the old signature of his decades-ago rival. "The debt on Coastal View is a corporate necessity now, narrator name," he said, his voice deadly calm. "I will pay it off. Not to save Alara, but to seize the asset and ensure Richard R. and his family own absolutely nothing. Tell me, what do you need from me to clean up this entire mess?" The CEO's affirmation, quiet and absolute, was the final pivot. With Mr. Harrison's full backing, the machinery of corporate and federal justice moved swiftly. He agreed to cover the Coastal View liability, allowing the company to seize the asset and use the evidence to pursue Richard R. for conspiracy and corporate racketeering. My meeting ended with a strange blend of corporate gratitude and personal devastation. I hadn't just saved the company billions, I had exposed a decades-long threat at the heart of the organization. My reward was not just a bonus but a new, unshakable power base within the company. I left the skyscraper with Alara, the weight of the last 24 hours settling on my shoulders. I booked her a flight home, ensuring she had a lawyer and a promise of immunity from the Coastal View debt. "Thank you," she said, her voice small, at the taxi curb. "You didn't have to protect me." "Yes, I did," I countered, looking her straight in the eye. "Thomas used our success to hurt both of us. The only way to win was to stand together against his deceit. Go build a real life, Alara. Not one purchased with stolen money." Watching her taxi pull away, I felt an unexpected wave of empathy. She was another victim of Thomas's relentless ambition, a casualty of the vendetta he was programmed to execute, but she had chosen courage over complicity. And for that, she earned her freedom. Weeks passed, the corporate world adjusted quickly. Thomas was formally charged. His confession about his father's coercion secured him a plea deal in exchange for testifying against Richard R., ensuring his father faced the brunt of the corporate fraud charges. Veronica Stone, facing immense regulatory scrutiny and public scandal, resigned from Trident Global. The Coastal View property was seized by my company, now a grim monument to Thomas's colossal failure. I spent the weeks in a blur of depositions and strategic meetings, but I no longer felt drained. I felt powerful. The fear, the heartbreak, the rage, it had all been metabolized into pure, cold leverage. I finally returned to the Georgetown house, which now felt less like a home and more like a crime scene. I walked through the rooms, touching the surfaces, the counter where I found the text, the floor where Thomas knelt. The ultimate realization was this: Thomas hadn't betrayed me because he stopped loving me. He betrayed me because he never loved me as a person. He loved me as a corporate asset. He saw my success not as shared triumph, but as a financial tool to fund his escape and execute his family's vengeance. When he demanded separate accounts, he wasn't seeking equality. He was establishing the perfect legal distance to commit theft without exposing his co-conspirator, Richard R. My divorce was finalized swiftly, quietly, and entirely on my terms. Thomas received nothing but the debt he was responsible for and the consequences of his plea deal. The Georgetown house was signed over to me entirely, a silent acknowledgement of the money I had poured into it. I stood in the master bedroom, the setting sun painting the walls in shades of orange and gray. I didn't feel vindication, I felt an icy peace. I had achieved justice, not through emotional pleas but through cold corporate logic. I had survived the attempt to dismantle me, and I emerged not heartbroken, but unconquerable. I walked into the home office, the place where I had executed the counterstrike. On the desk, waiting for me, was a single, engraved platinum plaque sent from Mr. Harrison. It wasn't a thank you. It was a new title. Executive Vice President, a step up from COO. I had been betrayed by the man I married, but in seeking justice, I had been rewarded with the ultimate power. The cost was everything personal. The gain was everything professional. But what would I do with this new terrifying level of solitary power? The EVP title felt heavy, a crown forged in fire and betrayal. I looked at the plaque, then at my reflection in the dark office window. The woman looking back was harder, colder, and infinitely more discerning than the woman who had walked into that office just months before. Thomas's fate was sealed by his own choices. Richard R. was facing down the full might of the federal government, thanks to his son's testimony. Veronica Stone was a footnote in corporate history, having burned her reputation to save a criminal. Justice, in the most clinical, brutal way, had been served. The resolution wasn't the traditional happy ending. There was no new love interest waiting to fill the void. There was just the silence of the large house, and the quiet humming satisfaction of a strategy successfully executed. The deepest secret, the final twist I learned from this wreckage, was this: success doesn't attract partnership, it attracts predators. Thomas hadn't cheated on me because I was lacking. He cheated on me because I was strong. He needed to dismantle my strength to facilitate his family's vengeance, and my success was the perfect, blinding opportunity. The separate accounts, the initial fracture, had been the ultimate test. He was testing my willingness to cede control, to trust blindly. When I agreed, I didn't save the marriage. I simply provided him with the necessary legal distance to execute his fraud without immediate marital consequence. My financial freedom became his financial weapon. I closed the office door, leaving the EVP plaque on the desk. I walked through the house, feeling the space breathe around me. It was empty of his presence and full of my power. I realized I wasn't defined by the titles on my door, or the size of my account. I was defined by my ability to execute justice, even against the person I loved. I was defined by the fact that when he tried to bury me, he didn't realize I was the kind of seed that needed darkness to bloom. I am now the executive vice president. I control the budgets, the strategy, the security. I am successful, but I am no longer trusting. I learned that the most dangerous lie is not the one told by an enemy, but the one you tell yourself out of love and loyalty. If my story taught you anything, let it be this: pay attention to the quiet demands, the shift in tone, the sudden, reasonable request that feels fundamentally wrong in your gut. That is the first cut of the knife. If you ignore it, you give the predator the access they need. My marriage ended in an FBI investigation and a corporate coup. But my life? My life just began. I stand here, whole, wealthy, and utterly free of the burden of deceit. You have watched me for 4 hours. You have seen every calculated move, every moment of sheer terror, and every ounce of my vengeance. And if you are still here, it is because you, too, know what it is like to be leveraged, to be betrayed, to face the impossible choice of your heart versus your future. Don't let my struggle be in vain. If this story resonated, if you felt that sickening fear when Thomas demanded those separate accounts, I need you to subscribe right now. Do not click away, lock in your commitment to the truth, and to your own survival. And if you refuse, if you choose to watch this story disappear into the void without leaving your mark, then I need you to go into the comments section, look me in the eye, and lament about why you would let this knowledge go to waste. Tell me why you would allow the betrayed to stand alone in the end. I am the COO, the EVP, the survivor. But above all, I am the woman who refused to be ruined.